The asylum door slammed shut with a deafening clang, sending an ominous echo down the dimly lit hallway. Isaac hadn't meant to come here. He was only supposed to be cataloging patient files, part of his new internship in psychology. But one misplaced file and a curious glance led him here, to the long-abandoned wing of Fernwood Psychiatric Hospital. Isaac's heart pounded as he stared down the hall, dust dancing in the beams of his flashlight. The air was thick and stale, carrying a damp, metallic scent that clawed at the back of his throat. This place felt wrong, terribly wrong. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard it, a faint, wheezing laugh, echoing from somewhere deep in the shadows. Cold dread washed over him. No one was supposed to be here. Hello? His voice was barely a whisper. Silence. Isaac's mind raced with 100 reasons to leave. But a creeping curiosity drove him forward, deeper into the labyrinthine hallways of Fernwood's forgotten ward. Isaac's footsteps echoed as he ventured further, feeling the unsettling weight of the silence around him. The walls were lined with peeling, faded wallpaper, remnants of a place long forgotten by everyone except its lingering shadows. He shivered, pulling his coat tighter, but the chill felt as if it were seeping from within. As he turned a corner, his flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that twisted and seemed to reach out for him. He quickened his pace, uneasy, until he stumbled upon a door at the end of the hall with a tarnished plaque that read, Ward C. Isaac knew the main wards of B and D, but he had never heard of Ward C. He hesitated, a primal instinct screaming at him to turn back, to leave, and never look back. But his hand moved on its own, reaching for the doorknob, cold and rusted. The door creaked open, and he stepped into what felt like a different world. The air in Ward C was suffocating, heavy with the stench of mold and decay. He scanned the room with his flashlight and froze. The walls were covered in scratched-out words, frantically scrawled messages clawed into the plaster. They are watching. She knows my name. Don't trust her. Isaac's stomach lurched, his pulse racing. The scratches were deep, frantic. Whoever had made them had clawed until their fingers bled. As he examined the walls, he felt a soft whisper, almost like a breath against his ear. Isaac. He whipped around, heart hammering, but there was no one there. Panic gnawed at him, but his legs felt heavy, unwilling to carry him out of the room. The darkness around him deepened, pressing in like a living entity. That's when he saw it. A name carved into the wall, larger and fresher than the others. Lydia. Isaac had heard whispers from the senior staff about a patient named Lydia. She had been a young woman admitted for violent delusions, paranoia, and a fixation on seeing figures in the shadows. The rumors were chilling. It was said that Lydia had claimed to see things that were not of this world, that she spoke to entities no one else could see. But she had died decades ago. The official records said she'd passed from a sudden heart attack, but rumors suggested she had clawed her own throat out in the middle of the night, her eyes wide with terror. And now here was her name, fresh on the wall in the place where she had died. Isaac's skin prickled as he backed toward the door. But before he could reach it, his flashlight flickered again, plunging him into darkness. He cursed, tapping it against his palm, when a soft, agonized voice drifted through the room. Isaac, don't leave. He spun around, but the voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. His pulse quickened, and a feeling of dread settled in his bones. He tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at him as he threw his shoulder against it, but it stayed stubbornly shut. Then he felt it, a light touch against his shoulder, like the brush of fingertips. He whipped around, the beam of his flashlight illuminating a figure standing inches from him. Lydia. Her face was pale, almost skeletal, her hollow eyes boring into him with a chilling intensity. Her lips twisted into a manic grin as she raised her hand, pointing down the hallway behind him. "Follow me," she rasped, her voice dripping with malice. Isaac's stomach churned, every instinct screaming to run, but his feet felt rooted in place, paralyzed. Lydia's gaze bore into him, as if peeling back every layer of his mind, seeing his darkest thoughts, his deepest fears. Against his will, he found himself stepping forward, following her down the twisting hallways. The whispers grew louder, echoing from the walls as he walked. Shadows twisted and danced around him, taking forms. Faces, hands, grasping claws that seemed to reach out from the walls themselves. "They never let me leave." The words were a breath against his ear, sending chills down his spine. He looked over his shoulder, expecting to see Lydia, but she had vanished. Yet the whispers persisted, echoing through the empty halls. Isaac stumbled into a darkened room, drawn by an unseen force. As his flashlight illuminated the space, he froze in horror. This was the therapy room, but it looked more like a chamber of horrors. Chains hung from the walls, and the floor was stained with dark, dried blood. In the center of the room was an old, rusted chair, and strapped to it was a skeleton, its hollow socket staring at him in silent agony. Isaac's breath hitched, his skin crawling as he realized what this place truly was. Ward C had never been a recovery wing. It was a prison, a place where the hospital's darkest patients were abandoned, tortured, and left to die. Isaac, the voice, soft yet menacing, drifted from the darkness. His flashlight flickered, and there she was again. Lydia, her eyes wild, her face contorted with rage and desperation. "They did this to me," she hissed. "They'll do it to you." Isaac backed away, his heart racing as the shadows around him began to close in, pressing against him, filling his lungs with a choking darkness. He tried to scream, but his voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. And then he heard it, a door unlocking behind him. He whipped around, scrambling through the door into a long, narrow hallway. The shadows chased him, clawing at his back, whispering his name, mocking his terror. He stumbled forward, desperate for escape, until he saw a light at the end of the hall. Isaac burst through the doors, panting, only to find himself back in the main lobby of the asylum. Relief washed over him. He was free, but as he took a step forward, he noticed the receptionist staring at him with a strange expression, clipboard in hand. "Oh, you're finally awake," she said, her tone cold and clinical. Isaac blinked in confusion. What do you mean?" The receptionist's lips twisted into a smirk as she held up the clipboard, showing him the top of the form. His name, Isaac Green, was scrawled in neat typed letters. Beside it, under patient ID, was a number he didn't recognize. "Ward C has been shut down for years," she said. "Patients like you always say they're here to help, but you've been here for over a decade, Isaac. You were Lydia's replacement." Isaac stumbled backward, his heart thundering as memories flooded his mind. Cold chains, scratched walls, Lydia's face, staring at him from across the room. This wasn't an internship. He had always been a patient here. He had lived his nightmares, night after night, his mind fractured by shadows and whispers. As the world blurred, Lydia's voice drifted back, her laughter mingling with his own screams, the same words echoing in his mind. "They never let me leave."